36 through 39. Jesus and his disciples sailed to the Gadarenes land, which is across the lake from Galilee. As soon as Jesus got out of the boat, a certain man met him. The man was from the city and was possessed by demons. For a long time, he had lived among the tombs, naked and homeless. When he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down before him. Then he shouted, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." He said this because Jesus had already commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had taken possession of him, so he would be bound with leg irons and chains and placed under guard. But he would break his restraints, and the demon would force him into the wilderness. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had entered him. They pleaded with him not to order them to go back into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs. Jesus gave them permission. And the demons left the man and entered the pigs. The herd rushed down the cliff into the lake and drowned. When those who tended the pigs saw what happened, they ran away and told the story in the city and in the countryside. People came to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man with whom the demons had gone. He was sitting at God's feet, fully dressed and completely sane. They were filled with awe. Those people who had actually seen what had happened told them how the demon-possessed man had been delivered. Then everyone gathered from the region to the Gerasenes, asked Jesus to leave their area because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and returned across the lake. The man from whom the demons had gone begged to come along with Jesus as one of his disciples. Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell the story of what God has done for you." So he went throughout the city, proclaiming what Jesus had done for him.
So, if I haven't said it yet, while I had an awesome renewal leave, I am glad to be back among you. I have missed you all, and I'm very glad to be back. Ready, as our bishop has taught us to say, to be all in, on the move, cultivating joy, multiplying love, and inspiring hope. That is who we are. So thank you for supporting and respecting my time away. I deeply appreciate that, and Mike as well. So on this warm and humid day, we were going to be looking at today's lectionary text regarding the Gerasene demoniac, and we do have many reasons to sometimes we just have many reactions to this text. And some of us are really intrigued. Others are fearful. Some of us kind of shy away. from those words demon and demonic, because they don't really have a very good reputation these days, and they aren't a part of our ordinary, everyday vocabulary. And so many times when we stumble upon this text, well, it's a hard text to deal with, and we don't always know what to do with it. We've also often used this text in ways that are not a true representation of the tortured lives that some people live. Regardless of how we approach this text, one can't deny that certainly demons and the demonic exist, and they express themselves in a variety of ways, sometimes oppression, sometimes injustice, sometimes in terms of illness. So let's just acknowledge that much. In terms of the meaning of the word, it's safe to say that often these words have been twisted to suit a whole lot of different purposes. Not sure what's going on here. Anyway, they have been twisted to serve a whole lot of different purposes. We've all heard ways this text has been preached. Sometimes the term is used, it implies demonic possession, but often it is used in a more general way. James Turner notes, as a post by Pope Leo notes, that the word demon is correctly translated as demonia, and that word doesn't always point toward literal demons. It includes fears, lies, addictions, oppression, anxiety, anything that chains a person on the inside, anything that binds us up. You know, sometimes that's just our own memories or our own bad experiences that keep us from moving forward in life. So anything that chains a person from the inside. I wonder, what invisible chains have bound you up today? And what would it mean for them to be cast out? Because the term used here for such a demonic possession is actually called ekabalat demonian, and it means to cast out demons. So as we consider this text, let's keep in mind we all face any number of demons. I have mine and you have yours, and they take on many forms, and they assault us in many, many ways. However, irrespective of how we define the language in the text, it's evident that this individual's predicament exemplifies the human isolation, the pain and fear experienced when one is marginalized due to the burdens that they carry, due to their disease or their illness. Similarly, this man's situation appropriately reflects the common community response to physical disabilities, addictions, homelessness, mental illness, or other forms of suffering, as we shove those who are afflicted to the sidelines or the margins of our community. Perhaps it's here that we need to pause and do what I like to call a soul check of our attitudes and ask ourselves, what are my first thoughts? When I encounter someone who lives outside the norm of society or my boundaries, what goes on in my mind? What do I think about them? What gets conjured up when I encounter the strange and unusual? Surely sometimes we say, and we've heard it, that, well, their condition is by choice. They chose to be afflicted. I'm going to be real honest with you. I kind of struggle with that. I get it. But does one choose mental illness? Or does it choose them? Does one choose addiction, or does it choose them. I know that's a whole nother sermon, and I won't preach it today. And maybe that's a battle that can never be won, but I don't think our demons are always as cut and dried as we often like to make them. And when I look at the healings and miracles that Jesus performed, it's a rare instance when Jesus blames the outcast for their condition. It's a rarity. So it's important to remember that regardless of an individual's challenges, their current state does not make them any less vulnerable, any less human, or any less deserving of respect and dignity than anyone else. And it makes them no less beloved by God. Clearly, this man did not ask to be possessed by demons. Now, it's true, the text doesn't name the specific illness this man suffers from, yet most scholarship will agree that it's an extreme form of some type of mental illness over which he has little or no control. And in all likelihood, given the reference to many demons, it's probable that this man is suffering from more than one condition. Now, let me just say, I certainly don't think that any kind of mental illness is a demon possession or even demonic, but it is the language of the text. And if you know anyone that is dealing with an addiction or mental illness or similar condition, you can understand the kind of possession that this text sometimes tries to describe. Such illnesses can consume a person in many ways, and the way they present themselves in each individual is many and it is varied. Nevertheless, in this man's time and place, Legion, as he calls himself, would have been considered possessed, spiritually ill, and because of his condition, he's been cast away from family, friends, his place of worship, and the community. He is not welcome in anyone's home or at anybody's table of mercy and grace. He is just not welcome. And of course, those who know him, well, as was typical of that time, they believe that he's suffering from his condition because he's done something to deserve it and to bring it on himself. After all, as we sometimes say, people don't lose their minds, demonstrate bizarre behavior, and act in crazy ways unless they've deviated from the norm of society or are on something. And that's just not true. It's just not true. The man in today's text, consequently, is forced to live among the tombs and having been ostracized by the whole of his community, all of his neighbors, his family, and friends. He's as good as dead. Notice this man's story emphasizes his complete estrangement. He has no clothes, no home, or any human contact, except that for the community's attempts to chain him. In fact, these demons have seemingly seized this man's identity to so much that he never even gives Jesus' actual name. It seems like whatever's going on with him has taken over him so much that it has seized and stolen his identity as well. So when Jesus asks the name he offers to Jesus is Legion, the name of his oppressors rather than his real name. The word legion in the Roman world had many number of meanings, but it often referred to as a military measurement of about 6,000 Roman soldiers who represented Roman occupation at that time. So here it more likely represents the numerous demons that have taken up residence in this man's very being and have bound him up in knots in constant turmoil. And so he's literally not only chained by his community, but by his condition as well. That word, then, is likely intended by this man as a metaphor in that he feels as if 6,000 demons live within him, so he names himself Legion. Consequently, because the demons that possess this man are represented by a legion of forces, he names himself as such. For example, I think that can easily be understood if we look at, the mental health world or that. Let's just take something that we all know. When we diagnose a depression, that diagnosis comes with a collection of symptoms which one must fight against. Anxiety, fear, anger, restlessness, shame, agitation, guilt, and so forth. So one could make a case for a legion of demons because you're dealing with all of those symptoms and they are all attacking you. Nevertheless, this poor man is undoubtedly, he's confused by his circumstances and his mind is in constant torment as he battles for his existence. And to add insult to injury, he's rejected by those who should love and care for him the most. I mean, notice the Gersenes community response to this man's condition. They are afraid of him. What is worse, they've given up on him and treat him as a problem to be contained rather than a person to be healed. And the chains and the guards that are posted and are used to confine him represent the community's failure to address the root cause of his suffering. And even more troubling, at least to me, is when the healing does come, the community chooses the familiar chaos of demon possession over the unknown possibilities of restoration and wholeness. We would rather have him remain in that state, Jesus, because we know what to do with him there. But if you heal him, what do we do with him then? What do we do now? We know him as he is, but we don't know who you have healed him and made him to be. Notice, once Jesus heals this man, what do? Well, they beg Jesus, get out of town. We don't want you here. You can't do that here, Jesus, because, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this guy now? We only know how to deal with him in his possessed state. We can't allow him to be changed. So much for celebrating the mighty power of the Son of the Most High God. So much for celebrating that power. Who is it in your life you can't allow to be changed? Because when we read kind of what this community says to Jesus, we think, what a shame. What a crying shame. And yet, while we often like to think we are more user-friendly toward those with illness and other conditions, the truth is we have not come far enough or as far as we often like to think. Like the Gersene community, our communities, homes, city streets, and other places are filled with our outcasts and castaways. And sometimes we're very good at sending them to other communities. Well, Indianapolis might be better able to handle their needs than we can. Those who find themselves cast out are plenty. They find themselves cast away from family, school, community, and yes, often church. Like the community in today's text, we have become comfortable sometimes with our own systems and processes of oppression, exclusion, and isolation. I pastored a church one time who had a young lady, and she came to church, and she came in a wheelchair. She could not control herself. So sometimes she would become quite boisterous during the service. And several people had come to me and said, Pastor, you need to tell them not to bring her. To which I said, I will not tell them not to bring her. If we can't stand her outbursts and a little bit of noise and understand she needs Jesus just as much as anyone else, we don't need to be the church. And we don't need to be the church. You know, one author noted that we build metaphorical terms for those that we consider too difficult, different, or damaged to belong in our communities. Mental illness, homeless, and criminal records have become the modern forms of possession that lead to social exile and dehumanization. Again, after Jesus heals this man, what do? They beg Jesus to get out of town rather than to foster healing. The truth is, our response isn't always that different from the Gersenes. Our response to those who live on the margins is quite often like that of this community's method. Restraint rather than restoration, management rather than ministry, condemnation rather than mercy and grace. The truth is, people may sometimes choose the familiar experience of suffering because it's something that they can comprehend, rather than the unpredictable nature of change, which might necessitate personal adjustments or acknowledge the transforming power of God. And you see, that goes on both ways. That goes for the one that's afflicted and for those in the community as well. Sometimes the afflicted will choose their affliction other than healing because they know who they are in their affliction, but they don't know who they will be whole. Nevertheless, our fear of change is what keeps us enslaved to broken systems that foster that isolation rather than healing. Because we still have the homeless living in our communities, in larger cities. You see them in encampments, isolated from the community and often resources. And there's no shortage of persons that are struggling with mental illness who cycle through emergency rooms and jails instead of receiving the care that's needed because there are no beds or treatment centers to care for them, and insurance is woefully inadequate. There are those who were once incarcerated, who have served their time, who still face judgment, are called not by name but by their crime, and face employment and housing discrimination. There are those who have served their time that walk our streets, and we say, well, we can't have them here. Rather than say, how do we help and integrate this person back into the community, we often say, well, we can't have them here. There are thousands of teens who struggle with any variety of invisible demons every day, and when they tell the adults in their lives, they're told, it's not that bad. You know, when I was a kid, stop that. Stop that. Because it's not about when we were kids. And when we say that to anyone, whether it be an adult or a child, it invalidates their experience and their personhood and who they are. Now I could go on with my list. Before I transition here, I do want to say on the table back there, when I was at annual conference, our annual conference did a mission project. We do one every year. And this year they called us to put together teen responder kits. They gave us a bag. I don't have the bag. I don't know what happened to the bag. But in a plastic bag back on the table, there's some cards. And in that plastic bag are some of the items that they suggest that you put in what they call a teen responder bag. And I think there's like a fidget in there. I don't think I had chapstick to put in it, but there's chapstick, a couple of other items. There's calming strips. And the point is to hand these out to teens who are having trouble. However, they could just as easily be for adults or young children. And then there's a piece of paper back there that tells us what to put in those kits. I think it would be a great idea if we made some of those kits and took them to the schools. I think it would be a great idea if we had some of those kits in our pews or at the back. nevertheless, it's a project that I think would be helpful. So just think about that. So nevertheless, as I move on, I want you to notice that Jesus' response to the community's response when he comes on the scene, because it's nothing like theirs. He doesn't hang out, and nor does he go to first who's who in Whoville. He doesn't first approach the normal people, those who are clear-headed, rational, and of sound mind. He doesn't go to the beach and hang out with everybody who's having a good time. He goes straight to this naked, tormented man who's dealing with his legions of demons he can't even name. The man who Jesus knows is scared of him. And he commands the demons to leave. In fact, this man who's already been healed begs Jesus to leave him and not torture him. He says, I beg you, don't torture me. That's strange. But that word torture speaks volumes about his condition. I don't know, maybe the torture is from being hurt by those he trusted, his family, his friends, and community. It could be from living in a life of fear and exclusion, always the subject of disapproval or somebody's censure or opinion. Or perhaps it is of being healed only to know that you will only be ravished again by the same problems. Over and over and over, we're told, his illness had possessed him. How many times had he found release only to be assaulted again? The text says many times it had taken possession of him. Likely it's more and all of that. But isn't that the nature of such? It takes over a person's personality in such a way that we don't know that person anymore. We don't know the boundaries between the person and their illness. But the fact that Jesus first goes to this man should really tell us something about Jesus. Jesus isn't going to allow the unclean spirits to continue to torment this man. Instead, Jesus first goes to him. He immediately confronts the oppressive powers that have destroyed his life and heals him by casting out his demons into the pigs, and the man is restored. Folks, Jesus confronts that which oppresses us and will cast it away. Now, that casting comes in many ways. You and I, we're all sitting here, and we know that not everybody gets a full restoration like this man did. We know that. But sometimes that casting away comes in terms of legislation and peaceful demonstrations or medication or a kind word or other peaceful ways. But Jesus never condones the oppression. And so he confronts it heads on. And notice this man's healing isn't a partial healing. It's total restoration to complete wholeness and liberation from the chains and torment of his captivity. You know, we can restore people to community. We can restore people to family. We can restore people to a different way of life. And when Jesus heals him, his dignity, his sanity, and community are restored to him. And when we last see him, what is he doing? He's sitting at Jesus' feet, fully dressed and completely sane, transformed into a devoted disciple of Jesus Christ. Now, that's not lost on me. That the suffering and troubled man, unlike those around him, knows who Jesus is. Did you notice that in the text? This guy knows who Jesus is. He calls him Son of the Most High God, which is interesting because up to this point in Luke's gospel, nobody has identified Jesus as divine. He's been teacher, he's been rabbi, he's been healer, but nobody's identified him as divine. Even the disciples don't get it. Why this man recognizes Jesus as such, I don't know. Some say it's the demons who have taken up residence in this man who know Jesus, and they are the ones who ask Jesus to leave them alone. Regardless, This naked, broken man living outside of his community knows who Jesus is. And maybe he knows Jesus because he believes Jesus is the only one with the power to heal the wrongs that he's suffered. Not because of anything he's done or believed or felt, but because of this all-consuming illness that has possessed him, body, mind, and soul. Maybe he knows he needs a Savior, and Jesus delivers. In essence, when Jesus heals this man, he says to him and us that there is no tomb too dark, no form of isolation so desolate that it can prevent the love and power of Jesus from reaching out and restoring anyone to community. Essentially, in healing this man, Jesus tells him, I know who you are, and you are not defined by your oppression, your illness, or anything else. You are my beloved child. You are not defined by your problems, your issues, all of that stuff. You are a beloved child of God. And then notice how Jesus sends him back into the community to be a beacon of hope and help for others. Return home and tell the story of what God's done for you. And when Jesus sends this man back into the community to testify to what he's done, he isn't just appointing a witness, but is reintegrating him back into society. So this individual illustrates for us that the transforming power of God can touch anyone, and it demonstrates that no one person is beyond the scope of complete restoration. God liberates people from modern-day captivity and isolation through communities and people who allow it and who embrace inclusion, such as mental health programs that treat people with dignity rather than simply managing their systems, and who offer comprehensive approach to healing, reflecting Christ's love and grace in our world. The man's commission to tell how much God has done for you continues to echo in the world today in people's stories of transformation. Former gang members who become peace activists, recovering addicts who sponsor others in treatment, formerly homeless individuals who advocate for fair housing policies, and on that list can go. All of these kinds of expressions and more embody the Gerasene man's new calling. So God continues to challenge us as communities to cultivate safe places for those who stand on the margins through creating community mental health centers who treat clients as whole persons and not just diagnoses or little mental health kits. Churches that welcome all people into full participation and leadership. Neighborhoods that create inclusive spaces for people with disabilities. Recovery programs where those in healing become healers for others. Immigration advocates who see refugees as potential contributors rather than a burden. Jesus is saying to us, go forth and free people. Help them break what's breaking them and live as a liberated people who recognize God's image in every outcast and welcome them as Christ has welcomed us. Our closing hymn.